Dear friends, colleagues, and audience, it is my pleasure to welcome all of you to our side event in the context of this 15th Conference of the State Parties on the Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. I am Carola Rubia, the Executive Director of Fundación Descúbreme. I have a brown hair, I'm wearing glasses, and I'm wearing a brown dress. For those of you who are not aware of our work, Fundación Descúbreme is a Chilean foundation born 12 years ago with a focus on promoting the full inclusion of people with cognitive disabilities in all areas of human development in Chile and Spanish speaker community. I am honored to be hosting alongside our President Catalina Sayé this side event centered on the role of foundations and philanthropy in challenging times when it comes to disability inclusion. It is well known that as a global community, we're starting to build back from a global pandemic while at the same time facing pressing challenges such as climate change and migration crisis. It is fair to say that these issues has had a profound effect in the global economy, labor markets around the world, and disruptions to the transportation, services, and manufacturing industry, just to name a few. But what is the role of foundations in this scenario? Our work is aligned with one idea and its core, that foundations can become vehicles and tools to addressing and providing solutions for persons with disability and the issues they face, thus facilitating sustainable change. Therefore, it is our role as foundations to make sure that persons with disability are not left behind in these situations. And in this journey, we have had the pleasure of meeting like-minded organizations from all over the world with whom we can exchange ideas, collaborate, and learn from each other. All of us making sure disability inclusion is a reality for many. It is our pleasure today to come with some of these organizations, our very dear friends from various foundations, in order to highlight global good practices from all over the world centered on the inclusion of persons with disabilities in challenging times. I would like now to hand over to Michael Fembeck, Director of Zero Project, global platform developed and implemented by the Esle Foundation in Austria, who will moderate this session. Thank you all once again for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Carola, for this wonderful introduction. I'm glad and happy that I can be the moderator of this session, and thank you for giving me this role. So here with me are two outstanding foundations that have an important role in their sphere and also on a global level, one of the leading foundations without any doubt and any exaggeration. The way we're going to handle this session and the way we proceed will be as follows. I'm first asking Catalina Sayé from Fundación Descúbreme to give a brief overview of their current work. Then we will move on with Javier Güemes from Grupo Social 11, who will present the current work and the status of development of Fundación 11 and Grupo Social 11. I will then hand over to myself and explain a little bit about the Esle Foundation and where the Zero Project is currently. After these brief, let's say 5-minute presentations each, we will focus on some pressing issues and questions that we all have to deal with, and we will engage in a discussion before wrapping up and ending this session. Okay, then let's start it off. Catalina Sayé, Catalina, why don't you give us a brief intro on Fundación Descúbreme and your current work and your current mission and investments? And please unmute your microphone.
Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. I'm Catalina Sayé. I'm wearing glasses. I have brown hair, and I'm wearing a white T-shirt. I'm happy to be here today. I'm from Chile, and I'm very pleased to be with these two wonderful foundations talking about all the work we do with and for people with disabilities. This government was founded 12 years ago, and right now the work that we're doing mostly deals with inclusion in all the areas of people with disabilities, particularly due to the pandemic. What we're working on is the networking and giving information to people with disabilities. One of the things we found during the pandemic is that information was not reaching people. So not only the pandemic was bringing a lot of problems because people did not have access to health, did not have access to so many things, work, but mostly what was being more complicated is how to bring all this information to people who spoke Spanish, but also have different barriers. So what we did, and for that, it was very, very important to reach out to all our great and wonderful partners around the world, is to bring to all the Spanish-speaking communities all the information and accessible information to them, information that was trustworthy and information that they actually could reach. So that was one of the things that we actually worked incredibly hard on during these times. Also, we worked a lot during this couple of years in how to bring all our work into the new sphere of social distancing, in a sense. Why? Because now you couldn't go into the workplace. So a lot of what we did was to perform things that we were already thinking about, things that we were all talking about, things that the world was already going to. But in a sense, we were all already talking about going into the new. It's funny because a lot of our strategy was already there, but this pandemic forced us to put a strong impulse into it. So we implemented a lot of the remote working models, not only within ourselves, but with all the people and all the work we did with people with disabilities. So it's interesting because not all of the work we had already been doing with people with disabilities within our organization and with international collaboration and in public policy all started being, I wouldn't say rushed, because all of it had already its own strategy, but I would say it started being more intentional and a lot more faster and a lot more stronger and in a more the word I'm looking for, it started being more how would be the word? It started being more we had to push ourselves to make it stronger in a world where we hadn't been before. So it's very special how we had to work all that we had done before face to face, all that we had done before in a different way, in a space where we hadn't been before, which is a space of only communications through an online world. So it's interesting because all of this we had done before, but not in this way. So we had to adapt very fast. We had to do this without fear, with a lot of commitment, and with a lot of trust, both in our partners, both in the people we were reaching out to, and with a leap of faith in ourselves too, which is something I'm very pleased that I think the teams and the people we were working with all created this trust and they all committed to do it. And I think we were very successful in different ways, but also we gave all ourselves, and we were able to go through this period creating new methods, new methodologies, new ways of working. And I think that was very important.
Thank you so much, Catalina, for this very personal and very open and honest assessment of of the current work of the of Fundación Descúbreme. We will, after this first round of introducing our work, we'll come back definitely to that and would like definitely learn to like a little more on maybe you give us some examples what that meant and how this on the ground affected also the work of Fundación Descúbreme. But now over to you, Javier Gomez from Grupo Social 11. What's your current assessment of Fundación 11? Where are you and where you are heading with this enormous work that this whole group is doing?
Thank you, Michael. Thank you to you and Fundación Descúbreme for inviting us also to take part on this discussion. I mean, definitely, ONCE Foundation is the result of the process of creating solidarity between the disability movement in Spain. It was created by ONCE. ONCE is a national organization of blind people in Spain that, they also manage a lottery system which is social because all the earnings of this system goes directly for the social inclusion of persons with disabilities. ONCE Foundation is the result of this system, and we are really very devoted exclusively to the social inclusion of persons with disabilities in many different areas, accessibility, employment, and other areas which are also important for them. Following what Catalina was mentioning, obviously for us, the impact of these last years of pandemic really has created and reinforced some of the essential services promotion of services that we do as a foundation. We need to say that something which is very specific from Spain is that ONCE Foundation and all foundations as such are included inside what we call the social economy sector. Social economy sector is a group of social enterprises, foundations, NGOs, all different, for example, special centers for employment. All these typologies are included inside the social economy sector, which means 12% of the economy in Spain, of the GDP, which really means that it is a very important sector, economic sector in Spain. So when we have really understood from the last events, from the pandemic and from the different risks and crises that we have followed after the pandemic, is that we really need to save the social sector for the impact of the different crises that we had in the past. The social sector in Spain and in many other countries is very fragile. I mean, the services for persons with disabilities, the needs of persons with disabilities also are different. The digitalization of some services that really have followed after the impact of the pandemic really had requested for us to revise the way in which we also fund innovation in Spain in the area of services for persons with disabilities. I think it's very timely that we have this discussion because the way in which we are developing new services, new types of assistance from the state and from the private sectors, even access also to some products, is being in a totally different way. And we need to adapt to these new ways, which are really creating, if we are not adapted, more exclusion of persons with disabilities. So definitely our foundation has focused on that from the main pillars of our action. One of them is accessibility. So definitely digital accessibility, how artificial intelligence, blockchain, different areas in which really accessibility is touched by the new developments in the digitalization of the society, but also from the perspective of employment. Employment is requiring also new ways of getting engaged in the labor market. The companies also have adapted to new ways of employing persons with and without disabilities. So we need to train also and to find ways to make the let's say the transfer of the skills that we had before to the new skills that are required by the labor market. So in all those areas, we are really currently working, and it is not easy, but we really need about international cooperation. We need initiatives like the Zero Project that you know quite well, Michael, in Austria through the Zero Foundation, but also Fundación Descubre for the Spanish-talking countries. We really need to find good and best practice that can be implemented also in Spain, and we are really thinking that this type of really of change of practice is so needed because we are facing new risks to which we are not really well prepared and well equipped. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you so much, Javier, for this quite open and clear insight into the current focus areas of Fundación Once and Grupo Social Once. And of course, representing the Zero Project, I completely agree that working with innovations, sharing innovations, working together is what will all bring us forward. This brings me now to moderating myself and introducing my own presentation briefly. So I'm going to speak a few minutes about what we currently do as the ESL Foundation with the Zero Project before then handing back to this great group and sharing some thoughts and some current developments. So the Zero Project is a project initiated by the ESL Foundation in Austria, but now also joined by Fundación Descúbreme, where we have some great cooperations, especially targeted towards Latin America and the Spanish-speaking world. And we were really happy that the last Zero Project Latin America conference was also hosted on the ground in person by Fundación Once in Madrid, and we had a great event there and also some great meetings and site visits. So these cooperations, this working together is definitely happening. So the Zero Project is about innovations. It's about finding, exploring, selecting outstanding innovative solutions, and then connecting them with people that can use them, that can bring them forward, that can be connected, and that are willing to share, to inspire, and work together and learn from each other. That's basically the mission of the Zero Project as we do it now for some 10 years. We have a very stringent research and selection process, meaning we have a year that starts every year in May and ends in February, where we define a certain topic. This year it's independent living and political participation, where we try to find the most outstanding innovations and continue in a very defined way. ICT technology has become one of the areas that we focus on every year, and the other areas of our research are in a 4-year cycle. So this year, as mentioned, it's independent living and political participation. The other 3 areas are employment, education, and accessibility. In these past 10 years, we have researched thousands of innovations from almost 150 countries in the world, and we selected 700 something, 700 plus, as well what we call awardees of the Zero Project. Our job is, as we define it, is to give these people visibility, to tell the stories, and especially invite them to a flagship operation, which is the Zero Project Conference in February in the United Nations venue in Vienna. And this ends normally the cycle, and we continue with the research and communication cycle of the year after. So this is the core process, and around that we have developed several activities in these past years. I mentioned already Latin America cooperation with Fundación Descúbreme. We have developed a database that's online on zeroproject.org, where you can search these innovations and these innovative solutions based on keywords, but you also find videos, pictures. So it's a full-blown research base now open to everyone. We're trying to engage with groups that can and want to use the network and the data and the expertise that's in this group that we have developed. So, for example, we have started what we call the Ambassador Circle as just one example in Austria, where ambassadors from countries that work close with the Zero Project are coming together regularly, also to share ideas, to share the call for nominations, and also to create those communities that we all need to foster innovations, to scale innovations, to take innovations from one country and one geography to another. So I want to end my presentation with pointing out again that our call for nominations is currently out. We're focusing this year on innovations, as mentioned, independent living, political participation, and ICT. So if you work on an outstanding project that, for example, works on deinstitutionalization, on supported living, on early childhood intervention, on personal assistance, on guardianship models, on rights-based inclusion approaches, but also on political leadership, on voter education, access to justice. Please join us and check out zeroproject.org, how to nominate a project. And if you don't, if it's not yourself, simply share the call. The call is still open for a few weeks. Yeah, please do that, because the Zero Project and this great network of organizations working together is only as good as those innovative solutions that we can all work with. Yeah, so this ends my presentation of the Zero Project. So I'm changing my head again to the moderator of the session. And yeah, so Catalina, you mentioned already how the pandemic changed and affected your work. You said things were already there, but you had to pick them up more quickly. You had and you could embrace them much more quickly than before. You mentioned already remote work, and your foundation is doing a lot on supporting inclusive employment. Anything else that you want to point out, how the pandemic changed your work, how projects were affected, how your funding was changed because of this past 2.5 years? And then, Javier, I'm going to follow up with you and ask you more or less the same question.
Well, yes. For example, when we implemented remote work models, I think there's several things we had to consider. First, you have to consider the well-being of the members of the institution, and also the well-being of the people with disabilities you're working with. So we had to completely change the way we did all our workshops and all our training programs. You also had to consider how to get the courses that we're doing. So we completely had to change the models of the courses. So the job placement, the training, the consulting, everything had to be changed. So we had to completely revamp all our models. We had to change the way we perform the models, because you couldn't do it online. You had to adjust everything, and we had to do it really fast, because despite the fact that, in a sense, the materials were not the same, the way you taught the courses were not the same, the people who had been to other courses with us did not necessarily adapt as easily to the same courses online. So you needed to help them to readapt to the new version of the courses. Like even the teachers, you had to reteach them how to do these courses differently. So there was a whole period of adaptation, a whole period of rethinking how to shape the whole culture of who was being taught, of who was teaching, and even how we thought about the courses, and how we would then convince the whole community that these courses were as meaningful and as important and as impactful as the courses we were teaching before. And and we were very happy with the results. And I think everyone, people with disabilities, people who then employed the people with disabilities, and the people who were teaching, everyone was very, very happy with the results. But this meant that we had to take a very fast, a very adaptable, and a much more whole and a vision of the human being and of the process, much more broader than I think the typical courses you had to take. Because now you had people, it's probably when you talk about how schools manage to take, I don't know, when I remember like my 2-year-old trying to have a class via Zoom, how do you make this 2-year-old pay attention? Then how do you manage anyone pay attention to a Zoom class? It's complicated. Like even when you have back-to-back meetings, one after one, it's very different. It's very complicated. Human beings are not to be seated in front of a computer for a whole day with no human contact. So there's a part of this that has a lot to do with how do you help humans connect with each other, that we had to consider. And I think that was one of the reasons that we actually managed to make these courses work. We took a lot of care of the human aspect of everything. And I think the team also took care a lot of their own human part, of their own human well-being. And I think that made a huge difference. It was not only about the work, and I think that was very important. Also, it was very important for us, not only for the public facing part, but also the private facing part. It's how we gave, and I know I mentioned this in the last question, how we were a trustworthy partner for other institutions, for our government, for the people with disabilities, for ourselves, as a trustworthy information giving institution, whether it was for people who, for companies who were hiring people, companies who already had people working with them, how to go through the process of the pandemic when they had people hired and people with disabilities, how to help them, how to deal with COVID protocols, how to do the whole process. And I think actually having guides that gave actual accurate information, timely in a way that they could adapt fast, that they could do the work without having to suffer through it, I think was very helpful for everyone. Also, helping different public institutions and in different contexts to adapt to the pandemic for people with disabilities and help them go through the process, and being a good partner in this situation also was, I think, very, very important. And well, and then again, and you mentioned it before, having wonderful international partners and interact with them, getting great information from them, being good friends and allies, and getting all this information out to the world, and getting information from them, and being able to compare, contrast, get this out to the world, do the conferences together. I think that also made a huge difference in what we could actually get out there and be helpful to others and make this all work.
You mentioned and maybe thank you. So you mentioned already a lot of great insights. You mentioned the human aspect. You mentioned the need to adapt so quickly to the new technology. You mentioned having to act fast, having to work closer in different ways with public institutions, and the need for more cooperation and outside the box thinking. So that were my takeaways. What do you, Javier? You also already, when it comes to the impact of the pandemic, you mentioned already digitalization as a challenge and as an opportunity, and different ways to how to look at employment models and how to get people employed. You might want to elaborate more on what actually been done differently by Fundaciones.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. I would say we are doing three new things, or reinforcing things that we already were doing before, but now they are really gaining more momentum and visibility in the foundation. First of all, we found out that some specific groups inside persons with disabilities were specifically more touched by pandemic and financial crisis that came afterwards. So we have developed and we are developing new programs, specifically targeting, first of all, women with disabilities, secondly, elderly people, and the third, which we are still planning and we will do in the near future, is children with disabilities. It doesn't mean that we were not working on them before, because we have been already working with these communities already before the crisis and before the pandemic. But we found the need to create and reinforce specific programs for them. You will see now that I will move to the second part of what I think is the second maybe difference that I can highlight now in this new period. But definitely we did a lot of things for the three communities, but still we have found the need to create specific programs to reinforce them inside the big programs that we already manage for all persons with disabilities in the area of employment and accessibility. The second big area is we have identified some social problems that have been exacerbated by the crisis. For example, one of them is violence against women with disabilities. You know, this is something which is becoming really, or it is already a big social problem, and we need to reinforce specific activities against violence against persons, women with disabilities. And we have, for example, employment programs which are specific for all those women that have suffered violence against them by any other, let's say, actor, their husbands, families, whatever. The second is loneliness. Spain, as in many other countries in Europe and in Asia, is one of the countries which really we are really having a process of becoming older, and we have really also problems which this process is bringing, which is very positive in general, but it also has a problem of elderly people with disabilities, which also suffer loneliness. So we need to face this also kind of pandemic of loneliness that we need to find ways to overcome, which is even more problematic when you are a person with disability. And the third one, Michael, that you have mentioned inside this small, this big social problems is the digitalization. I have already spoken about it before. Is definitely the way in which social services, public services, all type of communication between companies and customers. Really, in all that process of digitalization, we need to really try to find a good way for persons with disabilities. And the third part, and the last one, which I think is important to highlight, is the problem of funding. The impact of the crisis and the pandemic had really a very severe consequence in the capacity of the services for persons with disabilities in Spain. We had, but we will see what happened with the new context, but we still have now very important new European funds which are being allowed for preventing the worst impacts of the crisis. So we are trying to learn and to train our partners on how to utilize this funding also for social purposes, because one of the main problems we could have is that it can be used for many economic sectors, but not for social economy. So we are really trying to empower ourselves and our partners to make sure that this also goes for the social economy sector, including foundations. And the second is we need to find new ways of funding, because public funding and because fiscal problems are in the horizon, we need to find also the mobilization of private funding. So this requires new ways of funding social needs. And we are trying to also invest today, and we are also, let's say, testing new mechanisms to mobilize private funding towards social needs and social services for persons with disabilities. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Javier, and thank you for sharing these very interesting insights on your new target groups. As you mentioned, they were always there, but you're putting a stronger focus now on women, on the elderly, on children with disabilities, targeting violence against women, targeting loneliness, and also the digitalization aspect of it, and also mentioning the funding challenges. And this is what will lead us to the next question. Before I do that, I'd like to share some thoughts on how some insights or backgrounds on how the Zero Project had to work and around the pandemic. We are not, or in a very limited amount, directly supporting NGOs or social businesses or people with disabilities directly. As you all know, we are more on this research and networking side, and this is mainly our mission. What we learned from 2020 onwards was this kind of information sharing, doing a research process that's working and that even improved because people were even more spending time in front of the screens, and so this kind of cooperation worked. And in the beginning also the webinars were quite something interesting, and people used it. But core of our work is also this networking and matchmaking, bringing people together. And we organized a full-blown virtual conference of the Zero Project in 2021, and Catalina and Carola and her team did the same with the Zero Project Latin America conference. So a fully blown virtual conference. But to be really candid about experiences, it does not work without in-person meetings. This part of the mission that we all have when we work on sharing innovations and sharing ideas and learning from each other and bonding. This works only in these in-person settings. And I know what I'm talking about here, and I also know what I'm saying. And I know how difficult it is, especially for people with disabilities, to travel to conferences, to be there. What it takes for so many people to travel almost around the world, and having still all these obstacles and barriers on the way, and also within the conferences, and also our conferences are not fully accessible. I'm perfectly aware of this. We are all on this journey. But still, I think from the experience, and we saw this in 2022 at our in-person conference in Vienna. So we had some 400 people there instead of 800, which we still had in 2020. These people, they embrace this opportunity to come together again, to sit together, to share again, to have their spirit in the room and to learn from each other and have their ideas together. This does not work in virtual spaces. At least I didn't find any way to do that. So this is a challenge. I'm not saying that this is the only way. I think this is a challenge for those organizations like we all do, that also want to share and connect and learn and encourage. We have to find this, what is now called a hybrid model, which a word I don't really like, but still it's mostly used for making this mix of this screen corporations and screen sharing like we're currently doing it here, and the in-person meetings and the in-person events. So this, I think the best solution is still out there. It has not been found, and but that's our learning. We have to find this way. It's a lot connected to accessibility. It's a lot to creating accessible digital environments. It's a lot to creating accessible learning materials. So there's a lot that comes with that, but that's what we have learned. We cannot fully be digital, but we have to embrace it and work with it and find the best models of making this in-person connection to the virtual world. Yeah, so that would be my main sharing about what we are struggling with as the Zero Project, and we have a lot of thoughts and a lot of great ideas also for the next Zero Project conference. But that brings me to the future, and let me this time start with you, Javier, because you mentioned already the funding challenge that we all have to look for additional funding. So that the almost closing question round is now, what are your decisions? Where are you putting your investments and your focus currently? What fundings are you using to do what exactly, and what are your plans for this next 6 to 12 months? You mentioned already this focus areas, but you mentioned also funding and the directions and more the strategies that you're using. So what are you focusing on in this next six to 12 months?
Thank you, Michael. Well, we are now in a moment that it is a nice moment in the way of we were thinking that we were going out of this horrible financial crisis and the pandemic. And definitely now, when you see how are some of the indicators for employment and social inclusion in Spain for persons with disabilities, we are in a moment what we can say is better than we had in the last 2 years. The problem we have is that for the near future, fortunately because of the war of Russia against Ukraine and all the energy problems and supplies and the higher prices, we can foresee that by the end of the year, we will have some macro social problems that will affect also persons with disabilities. I mean, for sure, higher prices will create some problems of poverty, problems of competitivity in our companies will create problems in employment. So all these type of also some restrictions in funding and investments will also interrupt some of the social changes that are currently been going on. So in many ways, we foresee at the end of the year that we will have to face some challenges, and we are as a foundation getting ready for that. Considering that our starting point is better off than 2 years ago or 1 year and a half ago, so definitely we are stronger. We have solved some of the weaknesses that we could find in some services that were provoked also by the crisis. So in many ways, the whole system is stronger than 1 year and a half, but the social problems that we will have to face by the end of the year will be also major ones. So we are very confident that we will need still, in the case of Europe, for example, European approaches for social development. We know that, for example, in the European Union, there will be new measures to promote employment of persons with disabilities. There will be also new measures to create some facilities to move around the European Union, like the disability card. So we believe that we have to work also with this international European perspective in order to make sure that we can overcome in an easier way these social problems. But definitely, our assessment is that we need to get ready for a big social impact from the point of view of financing, economic situation, but at the same time, we are stronger and better off than 1 year and a half ago. So we need to get ready for that, Michael.
Thank you, Javier. Unfortunately, I cannot disagree with this not so optimistic picture that you're painting for these next 6 to 12 months. And we also see some really dark clouds on the horizon when it comes to the overall social impact of the war and everything else that's currently going on. What do you, Catalina, what's your forecast? What's your area of focus in these next 6 to 12 months?
Well, we'll continue working on what we've already built, but in general, the way we work in the school room is that we always question everything we've done, and we always question our business model, and we always question what we're doing. So for us, challenges are part of the road. We don't believe that there's not going to be a crisis. We never believe that there's not going to be a problem next month or next year. So when the problem comes, in a sense, we never know which problem is going to come, but we know a problem is going to come. In a sense, we're always prepared for them. So for us, it's not a surprise. We're always saying, a model is going to change, a law is going to change, a business that we thought was going to be there, it's not going to be, because that's life. Life is always about changes. So we believe that our best strength is to be flexible, to be adaptable, and to always have a plan B and C and D. That's a little bit how we always think about how we plan our years and our 6 months, in a sense. So, and I think the team at this point is kind of like bored of me saying this. Like, you always need to have like at least 3 or 4 plans, because something will go wrong, because life is always like that. And if it doesn't go wrong, it might change. It doesn't necessarily go wrong, because life always changes the way you want it. So as long as people are committed, and as long as your team is strong and your team is resilient, and we all know what our north is, and we have great partners, great allies, we have the right networks, we have, and we know that what we're doing, it's the right thing, I think we'll find a way. And probably because our context is a context where you cannot really depend on public services, where you can't really depend on a lot of funds from others. You have to really create your own funds, in a sense. We always know that we have to be creating new revenue streams, new models, so we're always looking for the next thing and how we reinvent ourselves every single day. And I think that's what has kept us always looking for new ideas, new ventures, new friends, new allies, and we've been super lucky in that sense because there are always very good people around the world and around us who've helped us look for the silver lining. So I think that's what made us, despite everything, look for the good things, even when the moments are bad.
Thank you, Catalina. Yeah, I think with a South American and Chilean background, it's definitely a different point of view from this very Austrian continental European embedded view, where this situation with the disruptions that come with the Russian-Ukrainian war have not been present in any way in this past year. So for us, this was a complete surprise. But I think the Latin America is different with political upheavals in one way or the other happening all the time. So I think we in Europe have to learn or relearn that these past 50 years or whatever are not there forever, but this can, hopefully it's not there to stay, but it's a learning for us here. To give again our thoughts for these next 6 or 12 months. So there's a lot of things that we want and could in theory build on the Zero project as this sharing and learning network. There's one thing that we are working also closely with our friends and peers from Fundaciones Kubrime is finding improved models of scaling innovations that work in one country across country borders, so that they can start in another country. That sounds, maybe it sounds trivial, but it's maybe one of the most exciting challenges that we have in this area, because scaling is a word that can have at least 30 different meanings. It can mean starting your own organization in another country. It can mean finding an implementation partner. It can mean putting something open source. It can mean influence policymakers. It can mean transfer the technology. So it can mean social franchise models. And I think, please tell me if you know something more than I do, but there's no real approach of classification, of analysis, which model should be used to start it in another way. It's also very much dependent on the types of people, on the development of the technology, whether it's a technology or a social model. So there's so many things to consider, and we want to get more knowledge and more expertise, and getting 2 feet on the ground on knowledge and expertise, how these things work and how we could better understand these processes. We did something together in these past years, which we call the impact transfer model, where we accelerated models, where we give them training, background knowledge, information. It really worked well, and this accelerator worked really well, but at some point the accelerator ended, and then what happens after the accelerator? So this was the challenge that we're currently working on. So we're trying to build a kind of impact transfer 2.0 model, where we're bringing organizations into the room of scaling already at the beginning of the process of thinking who can scale to which country or to which geography, or to work with which partner, and bringing in powers with not powers, people with organizations with resources, and connect them to this innovative idea right from the beginning, and then try to find in a kind of matchmaking way who can work with whom, and also if they work together, that this partner can take them to the next stage after an accelerator ends. So to give you one example, a foundation from one country whose mission is to take and get innovative solutions from out of the country to their country, they are good partners, because it's their mission to also work with us, and we're trying to build these bridges. It's not trivial, it's not easy, but this is the next step of accelerating, to find these partners and working together on building stronger bridges from getting one innovations from one country to another. So that's our next thought, and we are developing this together with Carola, Catalina, and her team from the Skubrame, and so let's see where this takes us. So I hope at the next Zero Project conference we can already share some learnings on how this is moving forward. This brings me to the last and closing round. Catalina, Javier, anything that you want to share with us that came to your mind while you heard the others speaking? Anything any closing words, not closing, but finalizing words for this session that you want to share with our audience, highly welcome now. Catalina, maybe you start now.
Well, first, I wanted to say thank you to both of you. It's always wonderful to hear from our friends and allies what your experience is and to learn from you. Being a partner both in Zero projects and learning from Grupo Social 11 has been it's been not only interesting but also we've learned a lot and we're very appreciative of all the opportunities and it's one of the things that I think has helped us go through all of these times having. That's why I say when I was answering, like, it's not only partnerships, there are also friends and there's also people who help you go through different moments. It's when you see that working together makes a difference. And Michael, working with you and your team, it's been wonderful and we've learned so much. And seeing the power of networks, seeing the power of creating and giving information to people and bringing it to people who speak Spanish, it's been really beautiful and it's been wonderful. And one of the things I wanted to do is invite everyone to participate and invite everyone to actually be part of it. So that's one of the things I wanted to say. And also, I know that things sometimes seem, because of the world we're living in, seem that the next 6 months, maybe 3 years, sometimes seem a little bit glum. But also it's in this strength of this networks that we can find a lot of support, a lot of Australians, and a lot of ways to continue working, and a lot of support, and a lot of future. So that's also the reaching out and to everyone who will be listening. That's what we're here for. So reach out and come to talk to us. That's what we're here for. So thank you for giving us the space.
Catalina, and I think we all agree that leadership is definitely more important than ever in times like this. And can say that you and your foundation are definitely the word leadership is overrated, but what you do is and the whole foundation is leadership in your area. Javi, over to you for your final words. What has to be said? What has not been said so far?
No, I will actually take one of the ideas from Catalina to finalize myself. I think she has mentioned something which is critical. I think partnerships are also the key part of the solution, not just partnership among foundations, which are very important, but I think we need to believe that foundations and third sector, we are just one part of the equation. We need governments and we need private sector. So we really need to build big alliances between the three types of actors that can really provoke change in our societies. So definitely today is a dialogue among foundations, and I'm very thankful for you, Michael, and Fundación Descúbreme for allowing us to discuss among ourselves on how we can really improve. We need to really create alliances with the others that are also part of the solution. And we need private sector, we need public sector, and we need ourselves. So I would like to build on that idea that was just mentioned before by Catalina, and I really believe is a critical one also for the future. And thank you again for the opportunity to discuss.
Thank you, Javier. So while you were talking, I changed my closing words because you definitely give me a word that I would like to follow up. So I think when I'm saying as the ESL Foundation or the Zero Project that cooperation is the future, it's not really surprising. What I think what's more not so obvious is what you just said. These cooperations intersectoral. it's not always the same roles that I think when I look at innovations, there are different ways to work together, and it's not always so as some young entrepreneur developing something and then some funder funding this, and then the government takes it over at some point. You also need a government, and government can also be innovative. Government can give you a really innovative framework. So and NGOs can also be a sustainable factor behind it. So I think that there's a lot more out there in corporations to find out how things really work and how we can better and improved work together. It's also breaking up these pictures in your head about roles. I think that's also something important for the future to co-create a more inclusive and accessible future for us all. That brings me to the closing of these sessions. Thank you all for joining actively. Thank you all the participants for staying with us, and yeah, thank you all.